and welcome to our brand new weekly show, Imperial Cantina. I am your host, Braydon Leadbetter.
And I'm your co-host, Jackson Daleen. Is it still brand new if we're on episode 4?
It's pretty new.
I guess that's fair.
We're only a couple episodes in, but we are here to talk about The Phantom Menace with our lovely guest, my girlfriend, Emma Ahern. Emma, how are you doing?
I'm good. Hi.
Thank you for being here.
You're welcome.
Jackson, we'll start with you. What have you been up to in the past, 3 days since we've talked? In the Star Wars realm.
Actually, it's not in the Star Wars realm, but I got back into waiting for my girlfriend to close the bag of jelly beans. It's okay. It's not in the realm of Star Wars, but I have been playing a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2 online, and I finished my Boba Fett outfit.
Awesome. Are we going to get a reveal?
It's like a westernized Boba Fett. Yeah, I'll take a picture of it. And actually, I think I have one on my phone. I can show you guys real quick.
Awesome.
Do I? Yeah, I do. It's my Boba Fett outfit.
Oh, very nice.
That's cool.
It's too hot to wear in certain parts of the map, so my summer outfit is a Han Solo look.
Awesome.
He's got the black vest and the white shirt, so it was just fun and dumb. But other than that, yeah, that's about it.
Awesome. Well, Emma is a fan of Red Dead Redemption 2.
I love Red Dead. I haven't played in a really long time.
It's the good cowboy game. Honestly, we just got back into the online. It's been a lot of fun.
I just ride the horse around.
Yeah, that's fair. I like to go hunting.
Yeah, I've tried to get a dog, but I don't have enough money.
On this show, before we get started into the actual main topic conversation, we like to ask our guests just a couple Star Wars related questions to get our audience to know all of these different guests. But the first question I have for you, before I get into that, I'll turn this question over to you. What have you been up to Star Wars wise in the past couple of weeks? What have you been watching, reading, playing?
Well, we just finished our Star Wars marathon not too long ago. That's right. So we did all of the Star Wars movies. That's basically it. Now we're on to Marvel.
Yep. Yep, we're working through the entire Marvel Cinematic Universe, which I mentioned last week. But yeah, it's a taxing experience because there's a lot of hits and misses. But
it's a lot of movies.
Yeah, it's a lot of movies. But what do you think was your main introduction, the first time you heard of Star Wars? What was your main introduction to Star Wars?
I watched it when I was younger. My dad, obviously he's a dad, so he's going to show it to me. But my dad's more of a Star Trek fan, so it wasn't like...
Boo!
He's probably listening to this right now, too. So, hi, Dad. And so I remember it. I remember the original, Star Wars movies. But it wasn't until me and Braydon started dating that, he got me watching the movies.
Strapped you to a chair and held your eyeballs open so you could watch them.
And the one thing I used to always say is the only way I could remember it was the movie with the slug. So
she's talking about Jabba the Hutt.
I was like, you mean Jabba?
Yeah. That's the only way I knew it is the movie with the slug. So
that's too specific of a
yeah. Whenever she said that, I was like, wait, there's Jabba, but Jabba's not in just one movie. He's also in The Phantom Menace.
She's like all of them.
But yeah. I don't think I'd ever seen the prequels until we started dating.
Yeah. But speaking of Jabba, who is your favorite Star Wars character?
This is a lovely question. My favorite character is Jar Jar Binks.
Nice.
Unironically?
Unironically. I love Jar Jar.
Why is Jar Jar your favorite character?
I don't know. I think it's just because everyone hates him. I love him because I feel bad for him. And I don't know. He's just so funny. He's just it's how he talks. But other than that, my other I love Padme. Padme is one of my favorites, but Chewbacca also he has a place in my heart. He's my boyfriend.
That's me, Chewbacca. So this is kind of a broad question, and answer this however you will. But why do you love Star Wars? What is it about Star Wars that you enjoy?
I didn't really, I mean, once we started dating, I started watching it more, and then we went and saw all the new ones coming out and everything, and it was always so fun to go to the theater and see it with you in theater. So I didn't really start really liking the movie, like getting into them and knowing everything until we would like go and watch them in the theater and everything like that. So I think it's just like fun experience. It's fun watching.
Yeah, I agree. And I remember whenever we went to see The Force Awakens, I wouldn't even let you talk to me because I was so excited, and I was like stiff in my chair waiting for it to start.
Wore your headphones.
That's
I
funny.
did. Okay, so whenever we went to see The Last Jedi, we were living in another town, and because we were going to college, and I heard that there was a lot of different things that could be spoilery, especially like people walking out from their showings of the movie and stuff like that. People will probably be talking about the movie. And so I walked into the theater with my headphones blasting the John Williams score from The Force Awakens.
Just covering your ears.
I didn't look at anybody, and I did not take my headphones off until I was safe and secure in my seat and ready to watch the movie. That's how protective I was of myself from not getting spoiled.
Tapping Emma's shoulder. Let me know when it's ready, when it's starting.
Let me know when it's starting. Yeah. But yeah, that's, I think, it's always fun to watch Star Wars movies with such a casual fan like Emma. She just,
she's like, I'm just here.
Yeah, she just watches Star Wars because she likes Star Wars. She's not there
they
to
got laser swords and blasters.
She didn't have a Snoke theory. I mean, she just likes Star Wars.
Half the time I don't know what's, I have questions. I'm like, what? I don't know.
Well, so we were watching the Phantom Menace, and she was like, do you think they used for that protocol droid, that silver protocol droid in the beginning? She's like, do you think they used the actual C-3PO costume and just painted it silver? I was like, I promise you they didn't.
Yeah, knowing them, too specific. Just redid it.
But before we get into the discussion, one thing I want to ask you is, what is your most anticipated Star Wars show, movie, whatever coming out that was announced?
There's so many. I'm excited for a lot of the backstory ones, so a lot of them. So Ahsoka and Kenobi, and what else was there? I think Ahsoka I'm really excited about, because once seeing Ahsoka, I always, heard Braydon talk about Ahsoka. But then once seeing her in Mando, I'm like, wow, I really like her. So I'm excited about that one.
Cool. I think me and Jackson are in agreement that Kenobi is our number one right now.
I'm excited about that one too.
Yeah. But let's kind of dive into the Phantom Menace, because I love talking about the Phantom Menace because I think at the beginning of the whole internet thing, the initial reaction for everybody when you're talking about the Phantom Menace is that it's just an awful, terrible movie that you should never watch. But the more you watch it and kind of appreciate it for what George Lucas was going for whenever he made the movie, there's actually a lot to like and appreciate.
A lot happens in this movie.
It's a busy movie. Completely
agree. I can completely understand that there's, a 6-hour cut of this, because a bunch happens.
Yeah. I remember there was a behind the scenes kind of documentary that's on YouTube. It's called The Beginning. And at some point, George is watching a cut in an auditorium. And as soon as the credits roll, he's like, we might have gone too far in a few places. And I was like, you know what? You're right, George, but it's all right.
It's all right.
So we'll start with you, Emma. What is kind of your overall thoughts and reaction to this movie just as a whole?
I really like it. I think that I really like the prequels. I think a lot of people who don't like it, I don't really understand it, but that might just because I'm not really that far into Star Wars, but I really like them. I enjoy kind of hearing the backstory, and like I said, I really like Padme, so I like the hearing her story inside of it and seeing kind of the idea of this young queen, awesome person, and then getting kind of like ruined by this like guy who ends up being, bad in the end, in a sense.
Did you ever see this movie before we met?
I don't think so.
Do you remember anything like hearing about it, like any of the promotional stuff, or was your brother into it at all when you were little?
No, my brother wasn't. So I don't remember it at all when I was younger. Other than like we had the original three Star Wars movies. That was really.
Yeah, I have the opposite experience. I didn't watch the original trilogy until later. But Jackson, what about you? What is your reaction to this viewing?
Honestly, this most recent watch has probably been my most positive viewing of it. Not even like I trashed Phantom Menace. It wasn't that I disliked it. It was just that there was so much going on that I didn't fully comprehend everything that was happening. But watching it now, I've realized it's very much like I understand exactly what George was doing.
Yeah.
His dialogue just falls a little flat. He had too much. So that's kind of why I'm like, maybe that issue would have been fixed with a longer cut, just because he's able to flesh everything out rather than try and jam pack it in this 2-hour movie. And that was kind of my feeling, I think, overall, is that the movie just feels rushed, which I think is funny because nothing also kind of happens in it. And a lot of people can find themselves bored with this movie.
Yeah, I think
but there's a lot that happens, too. Like, it's a very, very complex, constructed, like, story that goes on and like the politics that play in, but like it is so much for 2 hours,
Yeah,
and it's kind of hits you.
It's kind of convoluted because I think you went into this with a goal target audience being, as he says, like 12-year-olds. Like Star Wars is a movie for 12-year-olds, but also he weaves in these complex political narratives that are kind of hard to follow if you don't really understand how bodies of government work and the kind of negotiations of, trade routes and the trade federation jargon, and the taxation of trade routes. But yeah, I think that's kind of, and you also talk about the dialogue. I think what he's going for with the dialogue is the reason why it kind of falls flat and the way it kind of feels very, very flat and boring is because he wanted a lot of the prequel era characters to kind of talk a little more Shakespearean and a little more
like
the dialect kind of changed as the galaxy progressed.
Everybody talked like it was Shakespearean, where you don't take a breath in your sentences, you just say and everything. You use like this
weird big vocabulary that we don't use anymore. So I think that the performances don't help, because when you see that dialogue, you don't really know how to perform. I mean, as an actor, you would know, like, that's kind of rough.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that makes it a lot more sense, actually.
But yeah, what do you think was your first experience with this movie?
I don't even know. The only scene that's been in my memory probably the longest is Obi-Wan hanging in the pit with Maul standing over him and he's slashing the lightsaber. That like whole sequence of like the jump over and whatnot. I remember we owned the prequels and the original trilogy on DVD, and the prequel I remember the cover for Phantom Menace was my favorite because it's the promotional poster of Jake Lloyd walking, but the shadow is of Darth Vader.
Yeah, that's one of my favorite Star Wars posters.
One of my favorites. So I distinctly remember that, like, in my childhood, but I couldn't tell you probably the first time I ever saw this movie.
I remember I had the VHS of the Phantom Menace back in like 2000. I want to say 2001. And my brother used to watch it all the time, and I think sometime or another I sat down and watched it with him, and I was just like encapsulated.
Like, what's going on?
Yeah. And then kind of a little bit later, I started to get into the prequels and like Revenge of the Sith, and I revisited it. And I always remember watching it and getting bored in the first like 20 minutes and turning it off.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't really come to appreciate just even the prequels in general. but even more so now until probably high school. And actually understand what's happening in the movies, because a lot of the time you're just waiting for the action to happen. You're not really paying attention to the dialogue or anything.
Yeah, yelling at the TV, "Where's Darth Maul?"
Yeah. But kind of moving on here, we kind of have our experiences with this movie kind of plotted out. But what are some of your favorite? We'll start with you, Emma. What are some of your favorite moments that stick out to you in this movie?
I think one of my favorites is the pod racing scene. I love the like sounds of the pod racing, and I think it's just overall really cool. And I do really like the like, Jar Jar being introduced, and like all these different characters getting introduced. But I think overall, like, my favorite is like when they're on Tatooine, and like getting to see like the city, and the pod racing and stuff. And the one guy, what's his name? The leg guy.
Saboba.
The leg guy.
She loves Saboba.
It's just clicked. I was like, oh.
Our favorite Saboba quote is Yokoto Bantapudo. We say that all the time. Jax, what about you? We'll just start with a couple that just kind of come to your mind when you think of the Phantom Menace. What stands out to you with moments or scenes for this movie?
It's definitely the last bit of the Maul fight.
Yeah.
It's probably from Qui-Gon's death to the end of that fight. And then I love the scene of Anakin leaving his mother and running back to her and hugging her. That was always like a very just wholesome scene for me. I mean, like it's horribly sad, and you're always just like, oh, poor Anakin Skywalker,
Yeah. You could say poor any character in this movie.
Poor everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, there were some good ones. In this recent watch, the one that stuck out to me was the little moment that Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon have before going to infiltrate the palace on Naboo, when they're standing in the forest, and Qui-Gon's just kind of telling him, he's like, you're doing good. He's like, I have faith in you. Like, he's like, I know all my focus is on the boy, but like, you're doing good. Like, you're a good Padawan. It's kind of their last little interaction before all hell breaks loose.
Yeah, I think that's a great moment. I always remember whenever I start watching this movie and the Jedi are introduced, I always loved how kind of mythical they still the way that George Lucas approaches it is that he kind of keeps them hooded and like silhouetted until they get into that one council meeting room. And it's kind of an epic reveal when they put down the hoods, but I can only imagine in 1999, you're like, oh my God, it's Liam Neeson.
Yeah.
But I love how they established the relationship between Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan so quickly. And,
the best part is in there too.
The best part.
Yeah, when they're on the ship and they.
Oh yeah, I was thinking about that too.
We'll get to the Force run in a second.
Get out of here.
We'll get to the Force run in a second. But how Obi-Wan's kind of like, but Master Yoda says I should be mindful of the future, and Qui-Gon says be mindful of the future, but not at the expense of the moment. Yeah, and I was like, man, that's powerful. Because like that's just like a good
dropping facts.
Yeah, it's just it's as the Star Wars thing of just dropping life lessons. That's a perfect one.
Yeah, for sure.
But I also really love just the bizarreness of a lot of the things in this movie. Like a lot of the production design is kind of weird, especially for like the Gungan city. Like it's so not like at the time it's so non-Star Wars.
Well, everything's just so like deliberately unique that you're almost supposed to not recognize it and comprehend what it is. Whereas I think, in the originals, it was like the aliens here are all these classic puppets because that's what we did in the 70s. But now we have computers on our side and we can make whatever we want. And that's why the seas of Naboo have like fish 4 times the size hanging out in the same caves,
Yeah. And there's
always a bigger fish.
Yeah, that's a good one. But even with the performances, they're so, like, even the performances are so bizarre because you have the decoy Keira Knightley or whatever. And the way she talks is she talks like this. Why are you speaking like this, Keira Knightley?
I was thinking about that, and I didn't know if they like specifically made her do that so that the voice, like, so that it matched both of their faces, because they used her voice, right? Like whenever it's also Natalie Portman.
Well, I think it's
they're
supposed to.
They kind of switch it in between because like sometimes it'll sound like Keira Knightley and sometimes it'll sound like Natalie Portman.
It's like a vague way of talking, so they both can sound similar.
Yeah.
So it doesn't. So you're not. You'll be like, oh, you sound different.
Yeah. Which I guess I had to do that, but yeah, it always is like weird. It doesn't fit.
Yeah, and then they have that. Do you know the pilot's name of the Nubian ship they're on?
The
main pilot. That guy.
Yeah. No, I don't know his name, but I know who you're talking about. The guy who's teaching Anakin how to fly.
Yeah, that guy. A lot of that guy's line deliveries are so bizarre too. Like
Coruscant, the whole city's a planet.
Yeah, it's just the whole planet's a city, but it's just I don't know.
Oh yeah,
there's like some weird, like charming bizarreness to this whole movie. But we meet the Jedi for the first time. Kind of ever. Like we never, this is the first time we're seeing Jedi at I don't want to say the height of the Jedi Order, but while there's a Jedi Order.
At their long-term status quo.
Yeah. And it's so cool to just see them kind of kicking ass off the bat.
Doing Jedi stuff.
Yeah, Jedi doing Jedi stuff. And I always loved whenever Qui-Gon is putting his lightsaber through the door and like trying to cut a hole through it.
Yeah. What is it? Close those blast doors.
Yeah. And then, as Emma was saying, the Force speed run. Why don't they ever do that ever again in the entire saga?
I wonder if it got specific backlash back in the day, and then it was just ultimately forgot about.
Yeah.
But yeah, it's kind of wild.
I wish because there's so many opportunities in the rest of the saga for someone to just speed run out of situations.
Just be like, see ya, like.
It's like the vampires in Twilight.
Yeah, it's exactly.
Yeah, it is.
They're like running. That's like
so
this. Funny. They should have like a scene where they're like running really, really fast. It's just showing them running.
It's like down the Flash and Superman racing. It's just Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon just booking it in the Jedi track.
Yeah. And then of course we meet for the first time R2-D2. And they're going out on the ship to do something. I forgot what. They're like repairing something.
The ship gets shot from the blockade.
That's right. Yeah.
And
I just watched this movie and I'm still like,
they send all of the astromechs up and R2's the only one who survives.
Yeah. And then that's
after Jar Jar accidentally activated them because he was bored and he couldn't touch anything. So he was talking to the droids and then they went to work. Yeah. That little droid did it.
What do you think about that as like basically the saga introduction of Jar Jar, like the way he comes into the main story? What do you think?
Is that he's just like I mean, that makes sense. He's just an astromech. He's just a service astromech. Because it's cute. Because then she gives Anakin R2 and he gives her C-3PO.
Yeah,
and it's something from them both.
I remember hearing there being like pushback about that's how R2 comes into the story.
I guess
as if they wanted R2 to be someone's droid from like the very beginning or something.
Yeah, I get like it doesn't happen. And even then, like technically he's Padme's. Like I guess that works out. Like I'm not going to argue about that.
And we already did that with 3PO.
Cool. Yeah, 3PO got a cool little introduction. Like that's fine.
Which people also hated.
That's whatever, I guess. I had mixed. I guess I never had specific feelings about naked 3PO. And
yeah, speaking of Jar Jar, this is kind of Emma's territory right here. I have a newfound in the past couple of years, a newfound respect for the character and the performance, and kind of what Ahmed Best was able to put into this character that makes it so unique. And I think Jar Jar is funny. Like, there is poop jokes.
Jar Jar's got some moments. Yeah, it's pretty.
Like
it's fair.
the what are you, brainless? I spec. Like, it's
Yeah,
so,
right.
it's so stupid funny. But what do you think it is, Emma, about Jar Jar that, one, people hate, and two, what makes you like him? Like, what makes you like him so much?
I think a lot of people hate him. I can see that he's annoying. I can definitely see that. I think he easily, could be a character where, like, without him it wouldn't make a difference. It's not like he added like a
He isn't
very
needed until Attack of the Clones.
right until he, completely ruins destroys the government basically, and causes everything to happen. But I think that's like a big thing, is that people, he can come off annoying and like kiddish almost. Like, it's definitely like a very kiddish humor that he has. But I like it because it just adds like a non-serious like thing to Star Wars, and kind of adds this like funny aspect to a really serious like movie per se, like serious movie. But yeah, I just like his like one-off like lines that he has, and funny things that he just adds in, and he's really clumsy and like
That's why he was banished from the Gungan city, was because he was clumsy.
yeah. And I take that. I can understand that.
Yeah. Jackson, what about you? What are kind of your thoughts on just Jar Jar in general?
I agree with the sense of like he's like this funny aspect to the movie, whereas everyone else is kind of serious. And I think the way Star Wars did that before was by making everybody have little funny moments, and that's where all the popular famous quips come from in the original trilogy. And George essentially took all of that and put it into Jar Jar and sprinkled a little bit on Obi-Wan and Qui-Gon, and those are the only two funny like people in the movie.
Yeah.
And it was all of this in Jar Jar, and everyone just didn't react well to it and found it, annoying and childish, and it wasn't necessary to the story or whatever. But like, it's not, Jar Jar helps out. Like, they need the Gungans like to stop, the Trade Federation. So like, it's not like he's completely pointless. He's just this dumb, like, whatever. He's like Big Bird, I guess, if Big Bird was really scary and could breathe underwater.
Yeah, and I think Lawrence Kasdan has put this. He's the writer of The Empire Strikes Back and The Force Awakens. But he has put this perfectly, where he says a lot of the humor in the prequel trilogy is kind of very silly. And he says that in the original trilogy, he called a lot of the humor goofy. Like, we're all fine here now. Thanks. How are you? And then he shoots the thing. Boring conversation anyway. He says that's kind of the humor that they're going for, especially in the original trilogy, was like the quippy Han Solo one-liners that kind of, that makes him charming and makes you love Han and the humor in Star Wars. And a lot of the humor in the prequels, especially with Jar Jar, is it's very clownish and very silly, like stepping in poop and, all that kind of stuff. But
I was like, yeah.
Yeah. But I think, with Ahmed Best and his performance, he puts so much into Jar Jar's mannerisms and his voice, and it makes him so uniquely Jar Jar.
It's not that Jar Jar is a bad, like, portrayed character. It's just a weird character that nobody really knows how to respond to it well enough. So they just got angry instead. Yeah.
And it's the what really upsets me is the backlash from the fans. They kind of like attacked Ahmed Best online consistently, and unfortunately Ahmed Best had like a moment where he was literally about to commit suicide. He came out about that about 2 years ago. But yeah, that's I think that's a lot of the problem with the Star Wars fandom, is so many people treat this like it's theirs, and unfortunately it's not. And yeah, it's just
they're so specific with what they want. but like can never be happy with what they get, you know? Like,
it's just such a bummer how many people just
who give their all.
They don't look to appreciate Star Wars. They look to they look to find what they'll dislike so they can talk about it on the internet, and that kind of upsets me. But what do you we're kind of moving on here. What do you think about all the Tatooine stuff, Emma, with Anakin and Qui-Gon, and how Anakin meets Qui-Gon?
I think I like it. I think it's like kind of a interesting way, like, you know, kind of just like walking into getting these parts for the ship, and there's like a little boy, and it's kind of weird because he's a slave, but you know, it works. And I like the whole like backstory, like getting to see, you know, where Anakin lived, and you know, but I think it's also weird in a sense because they kind of just like go home with this like young kid, like it's no big deal. They just like walk home with him.
Feel like, we won the race. Now, Anakin, I hate to break it to you, but I've bet your freedom and you're going to come with me now.
Yeah, it's like, in a sense, the whole thing is like really weird, and like if you think about it hard enough, it does not make sense in a way, because he's like,
that's the
really,
Jedi, dude. Just kidnapping children. That's how Obi-Wan was.
It's very weird, but I like the whole backstory of getting to see like where Anakin grew up and like his mom, and like and then like obviously like the pod racing, I think is like a cool touch to it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it's actually a very cool aspect having Anakin be like a child slave on Tatooine. It gives Anakin a lot of reason to be mad about life and reason to be mad at the world.
It shows Anakin that like the main emotions Anakin has been surrounded by in his early developmental years are sadness, anger, greed, rage. You know, it's all of the things that he ends up being consumed by.
Yeah. And I think everyone argues that it would have been so much better if we would have started with Anakin as a teenager, but I kind of disagree. I like seeing the child, the trauma that Anakin has gone through as a child, and why he becomes the way he is whenever we see him in Attack of the Clones, and why he gets so angry at the Sand People in Attack of the Clones when he finds out they killed or they captured his mother. I think that it's much more effective seeing him as a kid, because a lot of people have that trauma at such early stages of their life. And a lot of people argue it just would have been so much cooler to see him as a kid and like already have an established relationship with Obi-Wan to start out. But I disagree. I like seeing them, you know, first discovering him and seeing, oh my God, this kid has such, we're getting the midichlorians later, but he has such a high midichlorian count, and he's super powerful in the Force. Like he rivals Master Yoda. Like I think that revelation that Jedi have whenever they first meet him is really important too. But yeah, we eventually, oh, Jackson, I didn't move the conversation to you, but what do you kind of think about the way they meet Anakin and the way they come across him in this movie?
I think it kind of works out. I think the whole reason of like leaving, of like getting to Tatooine, like it's just, I think that flows fine. I don't think that's a very weird like pacing thing, if that was at all. And I guess I don't know, like it feels like you spend too much time on Tatooine, but like everything works out with how it is, you know. I think as for meeting Anakin, it's like fate. Like, I think that's kind of Qui-Gon's whole thing, is he understands that something brought him here.
The Force brought him together.
The Force showed him this child. And I don't know. I think seeing Anakin at this very young of an age and understanding the life he has ahead of him, and within that moment, the cloudiness it already entailed, because the amount of potential and pressure that they give Anakin,
and how much fear Anakin has
already.
From
just being surrounded by those just very dark and very just grossly human emotions that he has to endure at such an early age, and then he's all of a sudden thrown into this war, you know?
Yeah, and I think that's another reason why Yoda is so apprehensive to train him, is because he's seen some stuff. Anakin has seen some stuff, and he's been through some stuff, and that can lead to a lot of, as we see later, a lot of attachment.
Yoda too, yeah. Yoda's like, Yoda's probably seen enough to know that there is a risk.
Yeah.
And there's too much of a risk than there is of the gain that they could get from it.
Definitely. Emma, what do you think? Do you think that it would have been more effective if we came in with Anakin already a Jedi and as a teenager, or do you like it better him coming in as a child and first meeting the Jedi?
I think I like it better, like, coming in as a child, because I don't think he would have gotten like the whole aspect of how hard his life is that caused him to have so much like built up anger inside of him, if you didn't get to see where he came from. And I just don't think it would have like hit the spot of like the like whole reason why he has this anger in him, you know, this like bad part, because you know you get to see kind of like his house, and he grew up in this like, you know, place with just his mom, and they were slaves, and you know, and he's like tiny young boy, you know, you wouldn't understand that if it started out as him just being a Jedi. And I think it hits the spot better, you know, getting him, you know, introducing him before he's like finds out he's like a Jedi per se, or like, you know, has the Force. And I also think that like I don't know, my train of thought was lost, but I really like seeing him like as a younger, you know, kid first.
Yeah, I agree. Well, we mentioned this earlier, but I kind of want to get into it now. The whole aspect of midi-chlorians and kind of the whole uproar of chaos it has brought to the fandom. And some people like it, some people hate it. Jackson, what is kind of your stance on the midi-chlorians and what it kind of does for the mythology of Star Wars?
Honestly, like, I think it's funny how it itself has kind of died out to where the Force has been more of a natural explanation rather than the scientific explanation. But I like knowing that this universe advanced enough to understand what the Force was, but it eventually died. I assumed it would die out with like the Jedi Order, that kind of information. Like the Jedi were already a scarce thought, that like when the Jedi Order was destroyed, the Empire probably like removed information about like midichlorians and how the Force works, and it just kind of reverted back to this like natural phenomenon that just happens. Yeah. Yeah, because like you don't necessarily need it, but like since we have it, I'm not going to be angry at it.
Yeah, I think that it doesn't change much.
No.
It's not like they're changing the entire concept of what the Force itself is. Midichlorians are just receptors in your cells that basically tell you how sensitive to the Force you are. That's literally all it is. I think that people get way too bent up about it because people say, yeah, but it makes it to where the Force is no longer this living being thing that surrounds us. And yes, it still is. Midichlorians are just how your body interprets
this is how
the Force
it
around
affects
us.
you. Yeah, this is what it does to your body.
Yeah. Emma, what do you think about the whole aspect of midichlorians? I know you don't really get into the lore very much, but what is your opinion on midichlorians? I just had to explain what midichlorians are to her before the show, but we'll see how this goes.
I was gonna say, I'm gonna be completely honest, I don't understand it. I get that it's like kind of like how your body reacts to it, but it's just like in my mind, I just
they're like midichlorians themselves are just like little microorganisms in your cells that basically it's like cell phone reception. How good of a reception you have for the Force. Yes. And the more midichlorians you have, the better of a reception you have. So that's why they're like, oh my God, his midichlorian account is over 10,000 or whatever it was.
20,000.
Yeah, over 20,000. It's more than Master Yoda.
Not even Master Yoda has that high.
Yeah. That's kind of what they're basically. The more midichlorians you have, the better reception you have for the Force.
And Anakin is like the embodiment of the internet. Like he just has all of this power.
Yeah, I have a degree in biology and I still don't. It does not.
Doesn't compute.
It does not. How do they, they can just look at someone and know how many.
No. So do you remember that scene where Qui-Gon pricks Anakin's finger and he gets his blood?
Okay. And
he sends that little blood sample to Obi-Wan, and Obi-Wan puts that blood sample into their like computer, and it reads however many midichlorians he has per sample. So he had like over 20,000. He has a really big amount.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I could see it, not mattering either. I mean, this is like.
Yeah, it doesn't change the lore really at all, because they don't have to mention it in the original trilogy, because it's just, I can say now,
important in the original trilogy.
Luke probably has a very high midichlorian count. That's about it. They didn't have to make a big deal about it. I just think those kind of gripes about this movie are kind of dumb, because like, just stop, enjoy the movie, calm down.
Yeah.
Jeez.
I kind of want to know what I don't know. Maybe I don't know, but like, what was his purpose of adding that to the story?
I think just to give it a more scientific, because George loves kind of like science and anthropology and all that kind of stuff.
One sentence.
Yeah, Emma has a major in anthropology, but I think it's kind of just George's way of being like, okay, what makes somebody so force sensitive when there's other people in the galaxy who are not force sensitive? Like what makes somebody force sensitive?
It's like to give you a number reference to show how powerful Anakin is.
And is there a reason why like some people have more? Like, is it just
because their midichlorian count is higher?
Just the force wills it. Just how your body develops.
Yeah, it's basically a lottery by chance.
Yeah, okay. Literally.
But speaking of the Force and the mysterious ways of the Force, can we talk about Shmi's virgin birth and what are our kind of theories of why she just suddenly became pregnant and gave birth to the most powerful Force user of all time? What do you think?
Palpatine manipulated the Force to make Shmi pregnant, to make the perfect Force baby thing.
Yeah, is that canon?
Actually, I think it is. Let me look that up.
It might be in an old Legends novel, but I'm not entirely sure. Emma, what is your theory? Do you think it's Palpatine manipulated the midichlorians to create life in her belly, or do you think that, there's some other way she became pregnant?
I have no idea, to be honest. I think, in my mind, I just think they didn't want to hire someone to be his dad. I think they just wanted to give him a sap story. I think they wanted to give Anakin daddy issues is really all they wanted to do. And because he doesn't have a dad figure in his family, so then he kind of attaches to he attaches to Obi and kind of has him as like, his father figure to look up to. And, but I could see them like.
I think you do make a good point though, because like Obi-Wan, I would argue that Obi-Wan is more of like a brother figure, and Palpatine is the father figure, and that's why he becomes so attached and close to Palpatine, because he sees Palpatine as like this father
like
figure
wise,
for guidance,
older, successful,
and I think that might be because he might actually be the father.
Well, I was reading this, and I think just the actual canon of it is that like the Force just willed it to happen because it needed someone to create balance.
Because the prophecy,
because the prophecy, was that's the Jedi prophecy and whatnot, and Anakin still brought balance to the Force, just not with what the Jedi wanted.
Yeah, I mean, I will argue till the day I die that Anakin did fulfill the prophecy.
Anakin did his job. Yeah, Anakin brought balance to the Force, just not to what the Jedi wanted.
Yeah, what were you going to say?
I was going to say, but if technically Palpatine gets her pregnant, that would mean that Rey and Kylo are technically related. In a sense.
Nah.
Classic Star Wars.
Incest.
Well, I think a lot of people's saving grace for this movie is definitely the pod race. in the entire pod race sequence because it's just such a spectacle, and the CG still looks perfect today, and it's a 20-year-old movie.
I agree.
What do you love about the pod race? Why do you think the pod race becomes so effective?
I think the thing with the pod racing is that it is something easy as familiar as a race. But like there was no discernible track. You can't really recognize what any of the vehicles are. Like you can't really tell what any of the drivers are. But it's something familiar that, you know, it's usually just this sport of adrenaline. You know, it's going to be fast and it's going to be hectic. And then the race takes off and you realize how fast and how hectic and how dangerous. And I actually love how that first little like half of the race isn't without any music. It's just the sounds of the racers because it's just like that adrenaline racing and just like the engine roaring and just the cool different sound designs of each different racers and what, you know, what sound they produce. And, you know, just that the different what's the thing called when sound passes you? Is that the Doppler effect? Is that what that's called?
Oh, something like that.
When like the siren passes you, it's cool how like each, you know, racer when they're passing each other, what the Doppler effect of them flying by sounds like.
Yeah, I agree. Emma, what do you think about the pod race?
I agree with all of that. Like I said last time when we were watching it, I could like fall asleep to the sounds of the pod racing.
I did actually. I watched half of this yesterday, and the pod race scene knocked me out, and I was like, "Oh no!"
I think it's just like super calming, and like one thing I do like every time I see it, I always am like, it's going so fast, I cannot tell where he is, like compared to all the other, because like at one point it looks like he's like right behind someone and then all of a sudden they're not near each other.
Quick editing.
Yeah, so it like in a sense it doesn't make sense, but it like does make sense. And but I just like it as a whole. It's just like an interesting like scene. There are like a point in the movie.
I do like how everybody in the race dies except for Sebulba and Anakin.
Well, I was just gonna say I love all the different characters that are kind of showcased in the race, and I don't know why I love Ben Quadraneros, the guy with the big head, like his body is a big head.
Oh yeah,
I love him. And the pod race announcers are like NASCAR announcers. Oh man, yeah. I love the pod race announcers so much. And we got Jabba and your boy Bib Fortuna.
Yeah. I was thinking about that too. Or Warwick Davis hanging out with with Watto.
Yeah, they're sitting there laughing at. Speaking of Watto, you bring up. I'm glad you mentioned him because I almost forgot. We almost passed him up. I have a theory that Watto's voice was the original idea for the C-3PO voice. Now, hear me out. Hold on, hear me out. George's original idea for C-3PO for the voice was a used car salesman.
It's awesome.
And obviously, Anthony Daniels does not sound like a used car salesman. I think Watto is the closest we'll get to a used car salesman in Star Wars.
What we would have heard. Yeah, that makes the most sense.
Yeah, but anyway, I think the thing
we're doomed.
Public credit. I don't like the public credit. I think one thing I do love about the pod race is the way it's shot is so cool because we get a lot of POV of all the different of Anakin's pod, kind of like swooping past all the rock structures in the mountains. And it's just so like spectacular. Just the way it looks in general, but also I remember liking the pod race sequence so much when I was a kid. And I remember in the morning, I was too young to be in school, but we would have to drive down our street to go to the bus stop. So my mom would drive us down our street to drop us off at the bus stop. And I would have to go with her before I was in school to drop off my siblings. And I remember sitting where like the console is, where like the radio controls are. And I would pretend I'm in the pod racer fixing like the energy tubes, like with all the switches and the knobs and all that kind of stuff, funny. And like pretending I'm in a pod race. And that was like my favorite thing to do. I don't know why I did that so much. I always think about that whenever I see Anakin like switching that one like switch to turn on the power.
Yeah, like he's got to like flip it first.
Yeah. Yeah, I love the pod race so much. And you mentioned the sound design. Ben Burt, oh my God. I love the sound designs and how, whenever Sebulba's on Anakin's tail the whole time, you're just hearing. It's everything about it is gold. I love it so much. And it just screams Star Wars. Yeah, I love the stakes of it too, because if Anakin loses this pod race, he's kind of screwed.
Yeah, he just screwed over this Jedi.
Yeah. But I think Qui-Gon kind of sensed it in the Force that Anakin had it in him.
My favorite part is like right before the race, and Padme's talking to him, and she's like, I can't remember exactly what she says, but then he's like, "What? And you've never finished a race?"
Yeah, you've like, never won a race.
I never won a race, and he's like, "I've never finished," or whatever. Whatever he says, I can't remember exactly, but I think that's so funny. It's like a good touch to put in like right before he starts.
The whole time Padme's like, you guys realize we're putting our faith in a child, right? Yeah. Like we are putting the faith of my planet in this boy. Like,
and my future husband. Yeah.
But it's also funny because like Padme makes it like Padme's also a child, and it's like it's just all around like weird because it's like these two children are like controlling everything. Like,
I think that is kind of what makes this movie appeal to kids the way George Lucas wanted it to, is that there's so many young people in charge of really important things. But yeah, I think you make a good point too, that it's just kind of weird because Natalie Portman's like 15, 16 here, but she looks like she's like 22. So it's like right. It's a little weird.
Natalie Portman's face doesn't change.
Yeah. And then once the pod race happens, we get Anakin freed, and it's so heartbreaking once Anakin realizes that his mother hasn't been freed. It's just it gets me emotional every time
because he's been flirting with her the whole time.
Yeah, he's sad. He wanted a Jedi wife. But yeah, I think the moment where Anakin is leaving his mother and they're walking away and he runs back to hug her. Oh man, I want to break down into tears every time I see that.
And is it the Twin Sons song playing too?
Yeah, and the dialogue of like
John Williams just going off.
Yeah, and like I want to give props to Jake Lloyd here because he got a lot of crap for this movie, but this moment is so powerful, especially with his performance of like, he's like pleading to her and like, will I ever see you again? And Shmi says, what does your heart tell you? I'm like, oh, that's such a great line. I love it so much. Emma, how do you react emotionally to that scene?
I think it's really heartbreaking after seeing like, what ends up happening. Cause after you know what's happening and you watch it again, you're like, oh, that's the last time he sees his mom before she dies, basically. The next time he sees her, she's
incoherent.
Yeah, like she's dying. Yeah. She's dying. So I think it's like, I mean, one, it's heartbreaking because it's this young child leaving his mom. I mean, it's the only person he had in his life, But then it's also heartbreaking because, he's never gonna see her again, and I think that also adds to the anger that why he has a lot of anger in him is because he has to leave his mom also at a young age. He doesn't have a dad, but now he has to leave his mom, even though he's gonna get to go do this cool thing and train and whatnot, but he still like loses everyone in his family basically.
Yeah, I think you bring up like his training. What do you think about Yoda's kind of, or the Jedi Council, I want to say, their excuse of Anakin basically being too old to train? Do you think that's kind of the Jedi kind of tiptoeing around what they actually know about how powerful and dangerous Anakin is? Talking to you, Jackson.
Yeah, they definitely, because they understand how fearful he already is. And I was going to say this about like the Shmi scene, is that Qui-Gon's biggest flaw is that he's so focused on Anakin being the chosen one and getting him trained as much as possible, that he doesn't realize that since Anakin is older, his attachments are more valuable, but he's not old enough to understand leaving attachments aside and understand the bigger picture. And that's Qui-Gon's fault, is not teaching Anakin that. I guess he doesn't have the chance, but like even then, like that's everybody's kind of thing, is they just throw Anakin into this. And Anakin isn't old enough at the time to comprehend what that really means. And that's the council's way of telling Qui-Gon, is that, yeah, he may be the chosen one, but he's probably missed his chance. Like, it's just too risky now.
Yeah, I think the reason the Jedi do that is because they know that once you get to that age that Anakin is, it's, well, one, they form very strong attachments with their parents. And I think they like to train kids from birth because they can kind of train them up in like a life sense of just like, they don't even know what an attachment would even feel like. That's how they can kind of control that. And with Anakin, you know, he just left his mom for the first time in his life. He's kind of being thrown into this galaxy that he's never even, you know, he's never experienced anything besides a planet of sand and people that are awful to him. So I think it's reasonable for Yoda and the Jedi Council to be hesitant to train Anakin, and to, even though they kind of all know that Anakin actually is the chosen one that'll bring balance to the Force. They just don't know how it's going to go. And like they always say that like the Anakin's future is super clouded and it's hard to read Anakin just in general. But Emma, what do you think about the whole aspect of Anakin? Basically, everybody is so hesitant to train Anakin and hesitant to bring him into the Jedi Alliance, to the Jedi Temple, and you know, join the Jedi the Jedi Order. What do you think?
I mean, I can see if they have like this like bit of them that feels that is wrong, then like, you know, why do it? You know, if they can kind of see that he is pretty powerful, then it would make sense, you know. But I think it's, I don't know, I don't really have like a per se on it, because it's like, I think it just kind of adds to it, them knowing that he is powerful, but not wanting him to be a part of it, and then allowing him to destroy.
Yeah, I agree. And again, we know the awful future that lies ahead for Anakin. I see Jackson frowning over there.
I'm just thinking about Anakin Skywalker.
Yeah.
I do want to say, I wanted to say, when we were talking about when he leaves his mom, one of like my favorite things is when he's leaving and he's in his room talking to C-3PO, and he's like, basically he's just like, bye, and he like leaves, and it's so funny because he's like,
I'll make sure mom doesn't sell you or anything.
Yeah. He's like,
yeah.
He's like so emotional with his mom and everything, but then he's just kind of like, up, like, bye, see you later.
See ya.
I'm leaving.
I think it's just funny because we're emotionally attached to 3PO, so we're kind of like surprised at Anakin just being able to leave him.
Anakin's like third, like just hobby that he has.
It's just like a fun project he has.
Well,
Yeah.
I think it definitely like portrays that he's like a child, you know. It's not like, I think it shows off that it's kind of like, it was just kind of like a toy to him, basically. It's not as something that matters to him. So he's kind of like, I get to go do something cooler, so I'm going to leave, basically.
He's like, dude, I'm going to be a freaking Jedi. But, yeah, and then kind of as the plot progresses and we move into all the Naboo stuff and the space battle, well, we have basically three different things going on at the same time. We have the ground battle on Naboo. We have the space battle, them going to destroy like the central, is it like a droid
the
control
droid
ship?
Yeah.
And then we also have the duel of the fates with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Darth Maul.
It's the best part of the movie.
Out of those three, what do you think, why do you think it's so, because I've always thought that's kind of jarring, having juxtaposing all of those three in such a short period of time, because even the last 30 minutes, every 5 minutes we're cutting to different scenes.
Yeah.
Were you taken aback by how chaotic the ending of the third act is?
My brain just kind of shuts out whenever the space battle's happening, because that's the one that's the least entertaining to me. So then, yeah, I definitely with this watch, like I just was kind of on my phone, like whenever the space battle was happening. So I was just kind of able to burr through it. Yeah, I know. I paid attention for Duel of Fates and, Padme doing stuff, but like, yeah, it is a lot, and it's a lot of quick cutting. And like, there are times when it works, but it's also like the scene in Duel of the Fates where they're being held by the ray shields and they're just kind of sitting there. So it forces you to go to the next thing that's happening. And you're like, well, I'm great that you found a way to like, juggle all of these three things happening. The point is that you shouldn't be juggling three things.
Yeah. Emma, what do you think?
I think it is. I think it, kind of has to add all these points in and kind of see where exactly everyone is. I think the Down on the Ground I think it's a pretty different but fun, because I think it's just kind of fun to see all of
Avengers Infinity War. Anybody?
Yeah, basically.
Yeah, right.
And I every time I see that area when we watch the movie, all I can think about is it looks like the Windows screensaver. Like the blue sky and the grass.
What's this? I watched it when I was watching it yesterday. The shot of the droid army going to Naboo, and it's the wide shot of all the tanks and the droids walking in the fields. Just look like crap. Just look like old, just green, nothing.
Well, because all basically the only environment ILM was really able to create just completely digitally was just like plain rolling hills of grass.
Yeah.
Yeah, so every time I watch it, all I can think about is like a Windows screensaver, just like the blue sky and the green grass.
She says it every time.
I do.
I always think of in the first Star Wars Battlefront game, the like 2003 one like the training mission in the very first like level of the campaign is that fight, and you can either play as a Gungan or a droid, and it teaches you the training of like how to play the game, and it's like cool. It's in that like field map and whatever.
That's cool.
I like the also what I like about it is it, Jar Jar's character really shows in that, where he's like, what is it? Doesn't he get like caught up in he
bounces around the battlefield causing mayhem?
Yeah, and so it just kind of adds this like everything's so serious because you're bouncing back and forth through all these serious, and then it's just Jar Jar like flying everywhere. So it kind of adds that like goofiness to like a serious point in the movie.
Yeah, I agree. I kind of think it would be a little more effective if that moment you were talking about in the whole Duel of the Fates sequence with the ray shields. It would have been so much more effective if they just kept us in that moment for a little bit. And letting the suspense build with Maul and Qui-Gon meditating, and Obi-Wan's kind of just like filled with rage.
Yeah, that whole thing should have been just the fight, and everything else that like is cut in between should have happened prior.
Yeah, because like every time they cut away, I'm like, oh god dang it.
Yeah.
But yeah, speaking of, let's kind of get into Duel of the Fates here, because first off, the John Williams score is absolutely masterful. It is so good. Duel of the Fates is one of my favorite Star Wars themes.
Forget how quickly it just comes in.
Yeah.
They're like fighting, do everything, and then they're like, all right, cool, on to the next one. The door opens and song starts, and you're just like, ooh, that was a lot.
I think that's what makes it so effective, is it just throws you into the heat of battle immediately.
A fun anecdote before we talk about this. My senior year of high school, maybe that's wrong. Maybe because it was when Last Jedi came out. I thought it was also when Force Awakens came out. One of those two. My high school choir, we started our concert choir show by singing Duel of the Fates with the band. And the band director had a lightsaber like conductor stick. And baton, yeah. And it was very fun. Just the singing the nonsense words that are of that song.
Yeah.
I think it's cool to say that you like sang a song in a Star Wars movie.
It was cool, like with the whole choir together and like all the echo of everything starting. Oh, it was cool. It was fun.
Yeah. Have you seen it on YouTube? There's like a translation of Duel of the Fates, but it's like a mistranslation. So it's like corn on the cob. It's really funny. I think if you haven't seen it, I highly recommend just on YouTubing Duel of the Fates lyrics. It's really funny. But I think what makes this, Dave Filoni has said it best about how they're literally, it's called Duel of the Fates because they're literally dueling for the fate of this kid, of Anakin. And I think what makes it so effective is how absolutely emotionally driven this fight is. And, you know, the stakes that are at the helm, you know, literally they're doing all of this because Anakin is the chosen one, and because, you know, they need basically to stall so they can, you know, let everybody win. But
yeah,
it boils down to they need to stall so they can let everybody win.
Yeah.
But yeah, Emma, what do you think of this fight and why it's so entertaining and effective?
Well, I think the song really adds to it. That really makes it like intense and like pulls you in. But one of the best parts I think of it is when like the doors what is it? What are they?
The ray shields?
Yeah. Whenever it's like one opens and then Qui-Gon's able to get through, and then it's like closes Obi in, and he's just kind of like sitting there like, what's gonna happen? When can I go? And I really like, that's one of my favorite parts, is I love like when he's standing there like waiting to get into the fight.
It's the hype up he has when he starts kind of bouncing to himself.
Yeah.
And then unfortunately we get Qui-Gon's death, which for a lot of people was spoiled before the movie came out because the track listing for the score came out.
Oh no!
In early 1999, and the freaking track title for that moment is called Qui-Gon's Noble End.
Damn.
I was like, why would you name a track on the soundtrack that? But yeah, I think Obi-Wan's reaction to Qui-Gon's death there is what makes it so emotionally impactful. And how he literally can't do anything because the ray shield is blocking. So he just basically watches his master die and get murdered in cold blood in front of him. And he's trapped behind a shield.
Yeah, he's got to sit there.
He just has to basically sit there and... because... you're technically not supposed to get attached to your master, because like according to the Jedi Order, you should have been like, okay, that man is dead. Bow, my condolences, and keep going.
Be like, that sucks.
Yeah. But what about you? How do you kind of emotionally react to Qui-Gon's death, Jackson?
Qui-Gon's death, it's such a Maul does the move and just does that spin back at Obi-Wan. It's like he just knows exactly what he did, because like you haven't finished Clone Wars, have you?
You know the answer to this.
All right, where are you in it? You're on season 6.
You already
You're
know the answer to this too. Right. No, I'm on season 5, and I'm still in the droids.
Is that season 5? Damn.
Yeah.
The Maul, the things that Maul does in this fight is very specific, because I think that's his end goal, is to kill Qui-Gon, because I think that's what he's really sent there for. It's not to help the Trade Federation, it's to stop the Jedi who's trying to teach Anakin.
Yeah.
Obviously that's the Duel of the Fates and whatnot, but I think about the entire fight, the choreography is so good for this fight.
Oh my god, yeah.
Specifically the bit of after Qui-Gon's death, and it's Obi-Wan and Maul. It's the second those shields come up and they start clashing together, that's the best part of the fight, because it's so quick and it's so fast and it's so focused emotion of like, this is where Obi-Wan put it all, and Maul is trying to taunt and show off at this point. And while Maul thinks he bested Obi-Wan by having him hang off and he kicks his lightsaber over and he's slashing the edge and whatnot, Obi-Wan uses that focused emotion and just, jumps up around him and cuts the dude in half. Like, it's just those last little moments of that fight are just so strong, just so impactful.
Yeah, I totally agree. Emma, what do you think?
Yeah. I like it. Like, after watching the behind the scenes, or with what is it called again? The beginning. And you see like all that went into that fight and all of the tricks that they had to do, and then all of the things that they did to like they have the one scene in it where it's showing him when he jumps back up, and they had to like, what did they end up using?
They had to get like a wooden board, because whenever Obi-Wan's hanging on that one ledge kind of early on, and he has to kind of jump back up to get himself back.
Yeah.
And originally they had like a little trampoline that he bounced on and jumped back up, but that wasn't working. So they had to get two guys, I think it was their stunt doubles, holding like a long board, and Ewan would get on it and they would just launch him up. So it didn't look like he was bouncing down onto a trampoline and coming up.
That's funny.
So yeah. And then there is a part on the part where he gets thrown off that ledge, Ewan McGregor lands on a big like stunt mat, and he's basically, I'm going to curse here, but because I'm quoting Ewan McGregor. He gets up and he says, and they asked me if I wanted to do Star Wars. I said, fucking right.
I've seen that.
He's like,
He's like climbing off of the big mat.
He's so stoked to be in Star Wars when he does that.
It gives you a better like appreciation for it, because you see like everything that they did that goes into it, and all these stunts that they did for it, and it just like adds to how cool the scene is. With all these like you said, the choreography was just so awesome in that scene, and then when you see it from like the behind the scenes, you see how like happy and like excited they are doing these scenes, and it just like makes it even better, because you're like, they were really enjoying doing that.
Yeah. And I think also the use of environment during this fight is so cool, with like, they have all like the walkways and catwalks with all the power cells around it. And it just looks really visually cool, but also the way they kind of incorporate that with the fight itself is super interesting and super cool.
They take some tumbles in this fight. Yeah. When they're in the big walkway room and Maul kicks Obi-Wan in the face and he falls off the thing, he falls like 4 stories.
Yeah, you have to use the Force to catch yourself, as we learn a big arc of that in with Bel Zettifar in Light of the Jedi. But
no, yes, Light of the Jedi. Sorry, I thought for Enter the Dark for a second. I'm so sorry.
Not Wraith Silas, Bel Zettifar. But yeah, there's just, and then again with the production design and like the environment, what are the chances that they end up in a room with a big black hole ditch in it, like just a big
giant empty. Is it a
tunnel?
Trash compactor room?
I don't even know what that even is supposed to be. There's just like a big hole in the ground that goes down to nothingness. And you have to assume that there's a bottom, because Darth Maul gets out.
I mean, he's led to a trash planet. That leads me to believe that it's like a trash compactor room. Yeah. It's like a big trash pit.
But yeah, and again, how we're kind of expected to believe that maybe, I mean, we obviously know that Obi-Wan's not going to lose. But we see that it gets real close, that Obi-Wan's about to get yeeted out of there. And I love, like you said, the way Maul taunts him with his lightsaber and sending the sparks down. And you get to see just how Obi-Wan is able to deal with these situations, and how he trusts just in the Force in general to get him out of these situations. Like the only reason he's able to, he lives here is because he uses the Force to jump up out of the big hole in best Maul unexpectedly. And that's basically all because he was able to trust in the Force and, do what he knew how to do. But yeah, I just think that whole third act with the lightsaber and the lightsaber choreography is something we had never seen before. Just how quick, and it kind of is a little over choreographed. I would argue, because it's just so fast. But I would also argue that could be intentional because the Jedi use the Force
I think
to
it's
navigate
impressive.
a lot of these. It's very impressive, yeah.
I think it's impressive how it's they're how
think
well skilled of the
lore-wise-
swords people. Yeah,
I think lore-wise, I think it's like that because the Jedi, they have to train to fight actual Sith because Sith exist, kind of. Like they're coming out of an era of the Sith still, and they're trained much more like they're trying to beat a Sith. So they're all their moves are much more quick and they're a lot more agile as opposed to the original trilogy with like it's kind of raw and emotionally driven. Again, and the Jedi use the Force to kind of guess what their opponent's going to do next, and that's how they're able to react so quickly. It's because they can kind of look into the future a little bit. That's just kind of my take. But kind of not really closing out, but we got a couple more things on the list of conversation here. We'll move into quotes and some of our favorite quotes from this movie because there's some. This movie is kind of notable for not having the best dialogue, but there's some pretty good quotes in there. Jackson, what are some of your favorite Phantom Menace quotes?
I really liked Qui-Gon's "Your focus determines your reality."
Yeah.
That's kind of a good, just when we talk about themes, just that's a good quote that kind of overall the theme of just like destiny and just do what you make the choices that you want. I'm trying to think of some good ones from the movie.
I have a really good one when you're done.
What does Obi-Wan say? Oh, you were right about one thing, Master. The negotiations were short.
I love that.
Perfect introduction.
That's
for
such an Obi-Wan line too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we go. So I believe it's Newt Gunray or one of the Trade Federation guys. He's talking to Queen Amidala, and she's like, the Trade Federation has gone too far this time. And he says, we would never do anything without the approval of the Senate. And I just love the way he says that because it's so dumb and
classic,
cartoony.
This is getting out of hand, and now there are two of them. What about you, Emma?
I like the one when this one you have that's the are you an angel? And he's just kind of looking at her and she's just kind of like, what? Kind of like looking at him like, what?
She's like, don't talk to me, boy.
I hear the deep space pilots talk about them. They're the most beautiful creatures in the universe.
But it's also kind of weird in a sense because it's like this little tiny small child telling this like 16-year-old girl, you're really beautiful. And then it kind of just like makes it awkward.
I think it's cute. It's a cute little thing.
Anakin just likes exposing people because what's the one he says too where it's like, Mom, you said the worst thing in the universe is that no one helps each other, and Shmi's just like, shut up, Anakin. Like,
she's like, I did say that, didn't I? God dang it. I also love how that same scene when they're sitting at dinner and Anakin says, well, nobody can kill a Jedi. And that's kind of foreshadowing because he says that to Qui-Gon, who dies at the end of the movie.
My favorite, you're a slave, I'm a person, and
my
I'm
name
Anakin.
Is Anakin.
My name is Anakin.
He's so much like, he's so childish. Like, one thing he like does is like, yeah, he's acting, but he really just acts like a child, which I understand is probably where like a lot of people did not like it in a sense. Like, he's kind of annoying, like that annoying little kid, but he really makes it seem like such childish, like
very innocent.
Yeah.
I just love that little droid did it. I love that line. It's so funny. Do you have any more, Jackson?
I think my favorite, if not the only Maul line in the movie, is the "At last we will have our revenge." It's the only thing Ray Park got to say.
Yeah, no, that wasn't Ray Park. That's a different voice actor. Yeah.
When we were talking about it last night, like, it does not match his appearance at all. Like, because he changes, like the voice is different in the animated, right?
Yes, it's
Sam Witwer.
Sam Witwer.
Sam Witwer is in Clone Wars and Rebels, I believe. He's the voice of Maul, and he was also the voice of Maul in Solo.
Yeah, and it just doesn't. The one that they have in this one just does not match his character at all. Like it just.
At last, we will have our revenge.
It's like too like it just doesn't sound like evil in a sense. Like it just kind
Darth
of like
Maul.
Yeah, it just sounds so like old man. Like it just sounds.
He was cool though. Dude, growing up, I remember Darth Maul. Like, that was
everybody's favorite.
Everybody was favorite. That's the best. Yeah, that's the best part coming out of the movie was that fight and Darth Maul. And dude, he got chopped in half and he falls down that pit. And you're like, you're like, whoa.
Yeah.
You're like, there's two of them now. That's awesome.
There's not that many like standout Star Wars quotes in this movie.
Jar Jar, everything Jar Jar says.
Everything Jar Jar says. That's right.
Okie day.
Okie day.
What is the Boss Nass do?
No, that's my favorite quote. Misa crush my boss is unabungo.
Unabungo.
Yeah, but we'll kind of put these two together. We'll start with you, Emma. What are your favorite characters / performances that are specific to this? Not specific to this movie, but that are prominent in this movie.
I think like the most outstanding one is Obi. Like I think Obi-Wan, like the character is like really, sets up for later on. And I think Ewan McGregor. Oh my God, I cannot talk right now. Ewan McGregor. Thank you. I could not say it. I think he just really loves playing Obi-Wan, and it shows in his like acting. He absolutely loves it, and I think he puts like everything into that character. So like seeing it in this movie, it's like the start of like, his love for his character. And then Ahmed Best's like performance especially after seeing like the behind the scenes of how much he put into the character and like how much he like everything he did for the character, like it just makes you really appreciate like his acting as Jar Jar. So that's kind of what I love Natalie Portman as I love Padme. Like I just think Padme is great.
Yeah. Jackson, what about you?
My two for this one are Liam Neeson and Ian McDiarmid in this. I think Liam Neeson was very eager to join this movie from the very get-go. He signed on without even reading the script. So he's
a lot of the actors did.
Yeah,
That's
a lot
scary.
of people did for this. Yeah. But I think Liam Neeson was a very good cast and did a very good job at giving us Qui-Gon, who's supposed to be this he comes off as this wise and very collected Jedi master and whatnot, but he's also like, him and Obi-Wan, you could tell they like screwed around and did whatever. He's known in the council as being this defiant one. I think that's the thing about Qui-Gon is he has like his little mischievous moments, and that's where I think he like works well with Obi-Wan. The other thing in this is I think Ian McDiarmid's really good in this because you can tell in his acting choices, like he as the actor knows the plan that Palpatine has. Like you could tell him and George Lucas have had this conversation,
sat down
already,
and planned out the arc
Ian
of the
McDiarmid is aware of everything because in the movie, there's nothing that should make you be cautious of Palpatine. There's no the only thing you would be aware of is Emperor Palpatine. Yeah. And at the time, a lot of people were like, this is really weird and confusing. Who is this small boy Anakin? Who is this young Obi-Wan Kenobi? Who is this weird young Sheev Palpatine? Like no one processed
Wasn't
that
Sheev
really
until like 2013, by the way.
Yeah, right. And like you can tell a lot of the decisions and just dialogue lines. The way Palpatine, Ian McDiarmid says a lot of lines in this is very mischievous and like
we will be watching your career with great interest.
Yeah. He's just, you can tell he's planning and just causing mayhem and whatnot. And I think that's really cool that like you can tell he's been scheming this whole time when the movie doesn't necessarily show that yet.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally agree with Liam Neeson as Qui-Gon as like this kind of stoic, wise, seen some stuff kind of Jedi. Because I mean, his old master is Count Dooku. We kind of learn this backstory about how he kind of had a falling out with Dooku. And I really need to read Master and Apprentice.
I know I need to as well
because Claudia Gray can do no wrong in my eyes. But yeah, I definitely agree with the Liam Neeson Qui-Gon. I do agree with Ahmed Best. I love Ray Park's portrayal of Darth Maul and his physicality alone and how intense Maul always is. Especially, his stunt work is outstanding as always.
Yeah, it's killer.
He's kind of basically a stunt guy who was cast to be Darth Maul. That's basically what it was. Yeah. Yeah. Other than that, I think, Jake Lloyd went through a lot at this time in his life. And I think that he did a great job at allowing us to be sympathetic with Anakin. He's not just this. A lot of the performances in this movie are kind of one-dimensional, but I think Anakin actually does come off as very relatable and empathetic, and so I think Jake Lloyd does great in that aspect too. And there's a lot of just like silly performances that are kind of fun, like the Newt Gunray and the Boss Nass and all the we haven't talked about any of the battle droids yet. The Coruscant, that doesn't compute.
You know what though? I wish that they stayed how they were in this movie because they're actually scary in this movie.
Yeah, they're a little intimidating.
The Roger in this is a little intimidating rather than what they are in the later, and what their modern use of them is.
And the best part when
Roger.
when they shoot them and then they're getting on the ship and it's just the legs walking and it literally is just a pair of legs like walking around, doesn't know where it's going. It's the best part.
Yeah, I agree. Do you remember that, Jackson?
No, I don't.
It's kind of the beginning. So whenever they're getting onto the Naboo ship and they're escaping Naboo.
I do remember that. Yeah.
And they have to like free all the pilots and then they like shoot down a bunch of droids. And like then
shoots one in half.
We have a wide shot and there's just the legs walking by the ramp to get on the ship. But that's kind of the breakdown of a lot of our favorite characters and performances. We'll kind of get a couple more before we close this one out. But what are some of the themes in this movie that you kind of notice, like just lessons and life themes that you kind of notice that speak to you? Whoever wants to go first.
The big one about this is your choices define your destiny, and that you're allowed to be whoever you want to be. That's the big Star Wars motif, is that you choose your own destiny, do whatever you want. Yeah. And I think that's kind of the big thing. I think the big kind of immediate theme, especially with Qui-Gon and Obi-Wan and Anakin, is focus. Is focus on what you want and you will achieve anything that you put your mind towards. And, don't get clouded up with everything that's happening. Just allow yourself to breathe and relax and focus and pay attention, and you'll be able to figure it out. And that's kind of the lesson he teaches Obi-Wan, which eventually is what helps Obi-Wan defeat Maul. And that was what he was trying to teach Anakin, to where now, Obi-Wan has to do it.
Yeah. And
go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think that really shows when the pod racing, because it's like no one believed in Anakin that he would win the pod race except Qui-Gon. So it's like it shows that Qui-Gon has this sense in him that he believes whatever you believe you can do, you can achieve it. And I think it shows in the pod racing.
He knew Anakin had that focus, and especially with the amount of power he can create, he probably manipulated the Force enough to let him win that race in some shape or form. If it just gave him the luck he needed, And
I also think that this movie says a lot about believing in yourself, because even with almost every character, even with not as much Qui-Gon, but with Obi-Wan, you see just kind of his doubts as being a Padawan, and he's not sure if he can live up to the expectations that Qui Guy that's kind of cool, that Qui Guy has put on him as a master, and especially with Anakin, and everybody's doubting him consistently throughout this entire movie, and a lot of the time Anakin just chooses to he knows what he has to do. He believes in himself, and it's as simple as that. But yeah, and I think this movie, like you said, it has a lot to do with destiny and finding your destiny and the choices you make to get yourself on the right path. Obviously Anakin does not ever really get himself on the right path. But I think that's, again, the tragedy of the fall of Anakin Skywalker is he never really finds a way to get himself on the right path.
He just doesn't realize how many people love him.
Yeah. And I think he also he just doesn't let himself understand a lot of things, especially with the Jedi. Like, he's not very understanding.
Yeah.
Especially we end up seeing him when he's older, like in Revenge of the Sith. And
he's very tunnel visioned of a person.
Yeah, he knows what he wants, and that's all he wants. He doesn't want anything else. He doesn't want any alternatives.
He doesn't allow himself to open up for he's very
solutions. Closed off. But yeah, I think destiny will always be a theme in any Star Wars, any piece of Star Wars content, especially the later movies, and we see it in the sequels a lot too. They kind of capitalize on that. Did you have any more, Emma?
I was gonna say, it falls, like, the destiny falls in it, as in a sense of, like, Padme meeting Anakin in this, and that leads to, like Luke and everything later on. So it's kind of like destiny that they ended up meeting, and all of that. I think that especially is planted here,
especially with the Jedi, and how the Jedi are able to come across Anakin. I would argue that that's destiny and the Force bringing them together. I think we can this is going to be our last topic before we kind of close out here. What are some of the standout musical themes in this movie to you, Jackson?
There's not a lot. I mean, Duel of the Fates is like the classic. That's the original. I think a musical choice here actually is the music they use for Qui-Gon's funeral is the same music they use for when Anakin is being put in the Vader suit.
And
it's the same, death motif music that they follow. And I was sitting here watching that, and it was that song, and I was just like, oh no. I was like, oh no. I do like I didn't realize how much of the prequel score is kind of reused. A lot of the songs are used in very similar of just different scenes in different movies. So that's definitely, I think that's just kind of it for me. I don't have a lot with the music in this one.
Emma, what about you? I know you probably don't know a lot of the names of the scores and stuff, but what do you like about the music, and like especially Duel of the Fates and tracks like that?
I just think it's like really unique how they used the like song in that. I think it adds like another level to it. I think it completes the duel, so it like has this very intense.
It's this big grand fight with this big grand song.
Yeah, and I think having that like voices in it just like really like hits it hard. I think that's like really, is the most when I think of like the the music, the scoring from this one, that's all I can think about is that specific scene with music.
Yeah. I would say that Duel of the Fates is probably probably my top 3 Star Wars themes. It's hard because it depends on what mood I'm in for how I'm ranking the Star Wars themes. But I think Duel of the Fates is, just a masterclass in how to score a scene and make it epic. And especially, there's just a lot of different, you know, a lot of the stuff in, you know, the Naboo fight has some good moments, score wise. But I think the main thing that stands out to me in this movie is Duel of the Fates and how operatic it is. And
I think that was the intention too, was to make that song just specifically stick out.
Yeah, I remember hearing stories how people would walk out of the theater after seeing this movie humming Duel of the Fates because it just caught on so quickly.
Instantly stuck with you. That's awesome.
Kind of before we close out here, Jackson, where does the Phantom Menace rank in your Star Wars definitive ranking?
It's kind of lower. It's probably in my let me think. So it's 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Yeah. Actually, 6, 5, 4, 3, 7, 2, 1. I don't really have. I say that like Last Jedi and Rise of Skywalker are at the bottom, but they aren't at the bottom.
Well, that's the thing. I've always said this.
They don't have like a spot yet.
I've always said this, that even the worst Star Wars movie is a great Star Wars movie to me.
Yeah.
Because it's all just they're like, it's just Star Wars. Like Star Wars in general is all one big thing to me, and that's what I love about it. Emma, I don't know if you have a ranking, but do you think this movie would be very high in your ranking or kind of low?
I think it would be lower. It's not like my absolute favorite, but I still think it's kind of iconic because it's like the first start of like, you know, the prequels, but it's not like, you know, the best. It's not my favorite. So
it's very obviously a setup movie.
Yeah, but I think it's still like you have to watch it, you know, to if
you want to experience like the full effect.
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And that's why I disagree with Phantom Menace being cut out of the machete order. For people who are familiar of the order of viewing that's called the machete order, where it's basically you watch, I think it's A New Hope, then Empire, and then you watch Attack of the Clones and Revenge of the Sith, and then you watch Return of the Jedi, because you basically see Vader at his height, then you flash back and we see him as a kid and how he became Vader, and then we go to Return of the Jedi and see Vader's end. But I know, since you probably won't be on the rest, when we're going movie by movie, you probably won't be in the rest of these episodes. What do you think, if you had to say, in no particular order, are your top 3 Star Wars movies?
Oh God. I'm gonna need all the names. I can't remember all of them. I really enjoy, I'm weird like Braydon, I really do like The Last Jedi. I really do like it. But maybe that's just because I came in, I'm not like the biggest, fan, and I don't have all these theories and like everything, but I really like Last Jedi. I really like, I like the prequels. So I really like Attack of the Clones. One of my favorite scenes, because it's just hilarious, is in Attack of the Clones when they're in the diner with the other legged character.
It's another.
She's talking about the scene in Dexter's diner. We're not going to have an episode where we don't mention
both of you. Just
what do you have against Dexter? Hold on, Jackson.
It's nothing I have against Dexter. It's that you have too much with Dexter.
No, so there's like a shot where the same species as Sebulba is in the background.
I know exactly what you're talking about.
Moseying around and like walking out of the Dexter's diner, like casual, like so weirdly casually.
And every time it's just like the perfect amount of like in the background. I'm like, that's the scene. That's it. That's iconic.
And that has reached your top ranking.
For that scene specifically. No, and then I like
where do you think Mandalorian would sit in there?
Oh, I really like Mandalorian. I think it'd be high. I just really enjoy it because it's like you get so much from it. And I just you can't hate Baby Yoda.
And that's Grogu.
Sorry, Grogu. But I really, really enjoy Mandalorian. And I would like to say the last episode of Mandalorian, Braydon watched it without me, and then sat there staring at me watching for when everything happened in the last episode. I was very upset that we didn't get to experience it together, but it's fine.
It's like I still haven't forgiven him, but
well, because she gets off work at like almost 7 p.m. and I was not going to wait that long.
So you're like sitting in the chair, like gripping it, like waiting.
I was like, I'm not waiting.
I'm gonna do it.
I'm not waiting 9+ hours for you to get home so we can watch it. So I was like, I'm watching it. I'm sorry, I have to.
And then when we're watching it, I'm sitting on the bed and he's sitting over there like staring at me, like waiting for it to happen. Like, do you know what's happening? Do you know what's happening?
Like,
what is that?
It's like you understand what's going on.
So yeah.
Well, cool. I think, since we're at it, I think Phantom Menace is probably it's in my bottom 3, but I think it goes Attack of the Clones and then Phantom Menace. I think I like Phantom Menace a little more, just
really
nostalgic purposes. Yeah. I just think Attack of the Clones is a little more messy.
I like the mystery of Attack of the Clones.
Yeah, I can understand
that's
that.
what gets me. So,
well, cool.
The boppers.
She's talking about the Kaminoans.
I knew it. I was like, you talking about the Kaminoans?
Yeah.
He tells me that's me every time I watch it.
Emma, every time Jarl Poof comes up in any of the prequels, I always turn to Emma and say, that's you. Because she's got a long neck. She's got a little bit of a long neck.
It's you.
And Jarl Poof is kind of sitting there with their head swaying back and forth, just chilling.
He looks over at me every time and just kind of goes, there's you.
That's you.
Yeah.
That's funny.
Well, thank you guys so much for listening to this episode of Imperial Cantina. I hope you guys enjoyed our discussion of the Phantom Menace, everybody's favorite Star Wars movie, I like to say. But kind of closing out, Emma, where can all of the good people find you on your social media handles, Twitter, Instagram, any of those?
Instagram at ex.ma. That's really all I use mostly. So.
Okay. I don't believe her because she uses Twitter as well.
Not very much. But my Twitter is ex.ma Renee.
EXMA
Renee, you heard it first. Jackson, where can they find you?
You can find me on Twitter at Quacks and Scalene. It's QUACKSON and Scalene like the triangle. And then you can follow my photography Instagram, which is at Deline_photography, and Deline spelled DALEN. Braydon, what about you?
And as always, you can find me on Instagram at braydonleadbetter and on Twitter at braydathlon. And if you want to check out the show and look us up on our socials, we are on Twitter at ImperializedPod and on Instagram at ThroughImperializedPod. And if you're a YouTube kind of person, you can just search us up through Imperialized Podcast. We should pop up there. And guys, I cannot stress how important it is for you guys to head to our Apple Podcasts, leave a review, leave a rating. It really helps out the show whenever we have that kind of feedback. And also, if you don't have access to Apple Podcasts, we do have a Spotify and other things. So if you want to follow us on Spotify, you'll always keep up to date with all our episodes. But every week on our main show, we do take questions. So if you have any questions for us, me and Jackson always love hearing what you guys have to say and hearing what you guys want us to talk about. So any of our socials, just hit us up. And we will be covering every question that we get on our Thursday main news show. But other than that, I think unless Jackson has anything else he would like to say.
I'm good.
He's good. All right, well, cool. That was our review/discussion of the Phantom Menace. Next week, you can hit us up on the Apple Podcasts or Spotify or whatever you want to listen to us on. And we'll be talking about Attack of the Clones with another guest. I know Jackson likes talking about Attack of the Clones a lot. So we will definitely have fun talking about that. But until then, may the Force be with you.